The following is a presentation of KSL Sports. First and 12. A total roundup of BYU and Utah football and the expanded Big 12 Conference. Brought to you by Macy's Grocery Stores. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
Happy Sunday morning to you, everybody. Almost Sunday afternoon. My goodness. Alex Kirry, Mitch Harper. Together we make up the combo that is your First and 12 program right here on KSL News Radio and also heard on the KSL Sports Zone. Brought to you by Macy's Grocery Store. Freshest fruits and vegetables from local farms, your local favorite brands. Macy's, happy shopping. Mitch, we got to get to we got to rip the Band-Aid off of some of these you can't have everybody winning every game every week, especially here locally. It just has not been working out for Utah this year. And so let's just get right into it. Let's jump in for your Utah and TCU game breakdown from last night's loss in Salt Lake City. Now 2 in a row at home for Kyle Whittingham's guys. Let's get to it.
The Utah Utes post-game analysis.
TCU shocks everyone and takes down the Utes 13-7. I mean, I don't know if I should say shocks because I think Utah fans were a little worried, but still, Utah to only score 7 points. Like I know that there were questions about this offense with the new QB1 full time for Isaac Wilson for the first week, where he's the starter. But I thought that intangible, that moment of just knowing Isaac's your guy, and kind of the commentary from players coming into this matchup, you just felt like, okay, Utah's going to get right at home, late night game. I know that the whole historical rival in the Mountain West, that didn't play any role in this, but
sure,
there was a little bit of good juices going into this one, I thought, and it got worse, Alex. I'm very surprised, and it didn't help the cause too when you go into kickoff and Junior Tafuna out, Connor O'Toole, who they thought was going to get back, out. Yeah. Utah still banged up group. They get Kirry Reed back, which was a good boost, and you saw that impact on the defensive side, but Utah lacks an identity right now, and they're trying to find answers, and now you're 1-3 in Big 12 play.
Well, the guy who has been that Utah force this year, regardless of how everybody else has been playing or whatever people want to say about the offense, has been Mekhi Bernard. And he got kind of dinged up there in the second half. He was on his way to having another nice night.
Bloody knee.
I don't know what was. He went to the medical tent and he kind of ducked out and then tried to kind of get right again, but didn't return back to the game. I mean, he came back to the game, but he just didn't look like himself. And he was only 13 carries for 55 yards when he was good for 100 yards basically against anybody in the conference, especially a TCU team that wasn't doing great stopping the run this year. But TCU and, Josh Hoover comes in and goes 22 for 41 for 263, doesn't even throw a touchdown. And TCU was very pedestrian on offense. They only ran for 132 yards. I think total on the night, they were under 400 yards, but Utah was just over 250, I think in the 260s. And so not a great night on the offense for them. And I'll tell you too, what's really disappointing for Utah fans is this TCU and Houston stretch before they get to their bye week and then await BYU after that bye week, after week 8 or after their 8th game of the year. Like these are supposed to be the two games where you got right. And it almost is like last night actually made it to where you're still asking even more questions than you came into the game with. And it's not just the injuries. It's also just looking around going, all right, who's going to take over this game? And really, I think people are looking around too. The Boo Birds came out, and I know that, I was talking to you last night too about it. It's like, man, listen, I get it. Andy Ludwig, people are kind of booing the offensive coordinator, but it's hard if you're Isaac Wilson to not feel like people are booing you. You know what I mean? Like, he was throwing balls, and then he would have an incompletion or a bad throw, and it would be the boos would come out. And I felt so bad for Isaac Wilson, who has just been absolutely thrown into an early, maturity process, and it's been a hard go so far. And you know what? You got to kind of put it on the adults in the room a little bit, because they're responsible to make the best situation for a guy like him. And I think they're trying to force the look of the old Cam Rising way of doing things. They kept saying they were going to build the offense around Isaac Wilson and his strengths, and it still looked like the same old, still very vanilla. And I know you want to kind of make things simple, and I thought getting the ball to, Brant Keithy the 6 times that they did, I mean, he targeted him 12 times, and he only caught 6 of them. Some of them were off. He had a couple drops, actually. But, Yeah, 6 catches for 56 yards. That was the most receptions of the night. And the only big play he had of the entire evening was Money Parks in that 71-yard touchdown, which was a nice little bright spot, got him back into the game. But the defense is also not looking great. They gave up big plays to allow TCU to just kind of keep this thing going. And it was a mess in Salt Lake, and I just don't know. I mean, look, you go down to Houston, and if you have a hard time against the Houston Cougars, who, by the way, are going to be smelling blood in the water, I wonder how you're going to right the ship at this point because, you pointed it out earlier in the show, Utah's not just only out of a Big 12 championship game appearance, contention. They have much bigger issues right now than just trying to worry about getting to a conference championship game. But it is weird in a year that you thought that they were going to be the ones who were going to coast into that Big 12 championship because they have top-end talent. They know how to get it done. They know how to win Power 4 conferences. And, man, it's just taken a weird turn this year.
But I think the top-end talent's got to be questioned, though. I mean, you can't have these losses. I heard earlier in the week, Sly was talking to you guys, you and JJ, and on your show, JJ and Alex, and he's saying this would be different if it was Kirry Reed. Well, where's the depth? Where is the player development that's always been a calling card for Utah? It's not showing up. And I think that, and I still think Utah does have talent. I'm not saying they don't, but it's not showing up. And I thought the body language from Utah was poor on Saturday night because, again,
point.
The body language looked like they came out flat. And that to me was just shocking because I thought this was a moment where Utah was going to come out and just make a statement where they were going to be highly energized, like, hey, this is a new team. Let's start it fresh. We're behind Isaac Wilson. Like, we know this is not the playoff destined team that we thought we could be. But look, you still had everything in front of you because we know in this conference and what we saw with this weekend where BYU had a close call, Iowa State had a close call, 2 losses probably could get you still in potentially, and you came out flat. And I just thought that was shocking to me too, that the energy wasn't there. And look, TCU defensively has been bad this year. Against power conference teams, the lowest previous total they gave up was 27 points. And that was to Stanford. They gave up 27 to Stanford. They gave up 30 to Houston. This is a bad defensive team. And you only scored 7 points. That's what's concerning, too. Is like you can handle a loss, and if Isaac Wilson tore it up, you can move on and feel good about this. But the offense struggled and the playbook was held back, it felt like, to Isaac Wilson. At this point, Ludwig, you got to unleash him. Let him develop because maybe you're not going to be that team you thought you were going to be. But you know what? Build him up so you got momentum going into 2025 because things can change in college football in a hurry. And if this season picks up and you can start winning some ball games and, get some big victories, that could be great for you going forward into 2025 because Isaac Wilson's got a ton of potential. But, man, you don't want to get in this point where it's just a losing game after losing game, and then it becomes – like that's becoming your culture, and that's just not what Utah football's been over the last 10 years. I mean, they have been a winning, consistent, high-level program, especially at home, and that is not showing up at all. I mean, the poor special teams, too. You had a block punt. I mean, when's the last time you saw Utah football having these massive issues on special teams? I know it's not been quite what it was with Wisnowski and Hackett in those era. That was kind of their golden era, but it's a far cry from those days where that's a distant memory. They just got a lot of issues in all 3 phases, and it's got to get fixed hurry because this November schedule was once thought to be pretty easy. It is becoming a gauntlet with BYU and Iowa State still remaining.
Think about the mess of the situation that the Cam Rising deal has become, and it's not his fault. And it's not Kyle Whittingham's fault the way that some of these things play out too, because you're not really you can't plan out how these things are going to go with injuries and things like that. But it does make you wonder how long Kyle Whittingham's going to want to put up with this. He already has a hard time with what the new versions of the transfer portal and the NIL stuff. And by the way, the NIL situation in Utah is going to be a dicey situation for a while. You think donors are going to be gun shy going forward now, handing money over to the collective and then seeing it go to waste if that's and you know what? That's not to bag on Cam. I mean, he got paid, man, and he got paid for what he did in those years, walking up, and then the hope of what he could be. And you can't pay to play. You can't do the pay to play thing in college football, and so you just pay for what the guy's image is. And the unfortunate thing is, it hasn't given you much on the return of investment. And so, you wonder how much that's going to walk back your program a little bit too, because who knows how much people are going to want to donate when they see where the money goes and they see that it didn't actually do much, when it comes down to it, or at least maybe it was administered in kind of a bad fashion or whatever it was. So I don't know. There's a lot of questions swirling around here. I mean, honestly, can you feel good about saying that they're going to go down there and take care of business against Houston next week? I don't.
I don't either, but I think the good news long-term for Utah when it comes to NIL is that the revenue-sharing era is coming next year, and I do fully expect Utah's going to compete at the highest levels to give back that $21-22 million, and assuming 75-80% of that is going to football players. These players are going to make a nice chunk of change at being part of that 105-man roster next year for Utah football, and I think that's an interesting dynamic too. How much does this team just kind of fold up the tent and move on from this season, because they have not been faced with this kind of adversity in a long time? I don't expect that to be the case, but I'll tell you, I was just stunned by that body language coming into this TCU game, because I thought this was really a get-right moment, and maybe that was the mistake by me to assume that a Big 12 team is just a get-right game, because this league is just nuts, man. It is so crazy, the wild outcomes that are produced from this league, but Utah, I do believe that Kyle Whittingham can get it right and turn it around, but Ludwig's got to be willing to open things up for Isaac Wilson, because you saw in that arm talent, that 71-yard completion to Money Parks. This guy's got a cannon. He's going to be a big-time player, but you got to unleash him. You got to let him cook a little bit, and I think that's going to be the move going forward for Utah. They just got to open things up for him and not try to hold him back.
Let's take a break here. We'll come back. Last hour, we jumped in and heard from Kyle Whittingham. This hour, of course, we're going to jump in and listen to Kalani Sitake, his reaction to BYU's very last-minute, very drama-filled win at home this Friday night against a very stout Oklahoma State team, somebody who proved to be pretty darn good as they started to figure some things out, and then BYU pulls out an absolute fun comeback for BYU fans. So we'll get to that. We'll get that going on next. You can hear Coach Kalani Sitake right here. It is 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. It's also KSL News Radio. It's 1st and 12.